Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine, and this is Tower of London tea from Hardy and Sons, a favorite of mine. I've kind of gone off of a lot of the sweetened, or I should say flavored tea, black teas over the past few years. Most of them just aren't appealing to me, but there are a few left that I like, and this one is one of them. And I'm having this mug that is called Agatha. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be depicting Agatha Christie, but I just assume it is. So I thought it would be a good uh, little mug to use to depict. Am I seeing cat hair in this thing? Probably. Cat hair is everywhere. To talk about March Mystery Madness, which I haven't covered yet, and it's getting a little late. So I thought, let's do this. I participated in it. I had 5 TBR books or possibilities or whatever you want to call them. And of the 5, I read 2, and then I read another one that wasn't part of that grouping. And I wanted to read more than 3, but I also think that it was still a good amount. It was mostly happened in the first half of March that I got really excited and got into the mystery genre reading. And then later half, as you might have seen in my previous wrap up, I just really got into reading history, and so it distracted me, but it is what it is. Also, I cannot find the first book that I read, and I know I have it somewhere. I just cannot imagine where it went. So, and I decided not to turn the place upside down looking for it. So I'll just talk about it and use gestures or something, and maybe that'll help. But the first book that I read in March, totally, period, not just mystery, is One to Buckle My Shoe. I believe that's the name of the title. You know, with Agatha Christie's books, sometimes there's more than one title, so let's just say that's what it is. And it is one that, of course, as usual, I knew basically what was going to happen. Maybe not every single detail, because things get changed, or my memory doesn't always serve me right. But because I've seen the adaptations of almost all of the Poirot mysteries, and that should be a spoiler, but for some reason I can usually work it out pretty well. This one was, I would say, if there are like the top tier Agatha Christie, Poirot, Marple, any of her stories, there's like a top, you know, the ones that everybody always talks about, like And Then There Were None. Some people like to put Murder on the Orient Express up there, or Roger Ackroyd, etc. Forgetting names today, it's bad. It's the hat. The hat is making my head hot, so my brain isn't working. I don't know how Sherlock Holmes does it, but anyway, it's obviously not a thinking cap. Anyway, so, and then there's like the bottom tiers, which I'm not going to name which ones are the bottom tiers because everybody has their own opinions, but I would, maybe I put the Mystery of the Blue Train on the bottom, or close to the bottom tier for me. What's that other one with the big 4? I think it's called. That aren't horrific, that I didn't mind reading, but I don't know, they just weren't great. So I would say if you were going to put it in that ranking system, this particular one was probably somewhere in the middle. Like, it was good, but I wasn't blown away, and it was a little bit, I don't know if the word is convoluted, complicated, too many names that sounded similar, which always distracts me. But the premise of the story is that Hercule Poirot has a dentist appointment, which he's not looking forward to, but he is on top of. And of course, if he goes somewhere, things happen. So I think it's a little bit after he leaves, the dentist actually is found dead. And the presumption is that it was suicide, but Poirot believes differently, and an investigation kicks off. And of course, you find out that there's a whole thing going on. There's a whole plan involving coincidences and reunions and, yes, and motorcycles and hidden identities, etc. I don't want to give away everything, but I like it, especially because it seems like Poirot is more established, wherein even if the police don't exactly agree with him, they let him do what he wants so that he could get to the bottom of it. And I kind of like that, because there's like a faith that they have in him that he'll figure things out, which is good, because sometimes there are other books where they're really not nice about it, and he has to kind of prove them wrong, which who needs that? But so it works out. I'm not saying that they never doubt him at all and kind of scoff, but it's good. So I would say if you really do like, if you've read Agatha Christie before and you're like, should I read this one next? I wouldn't say no. I would just say don't expect to be blown away with the amazingness of it. It's just a good read, and it's slightly cozy enough to be able to curl up on a cool March day. It's not a cool day today in New York. So this is actually iced. It's crazy. I don't know what's happening this month, but it's going to cool down again. So now, speaking of books that weren't terrible but didn't absolutely amaze me, this one actually falls a little bit below Agatha Christie, in my opinion, because this is the first book I've ever read by M.C. Beaton. I've heard various opinions. I've heard, oh, I like M.C. Beaton's books, and I also heard, oh, didn't get into it. No, not my thing. So I decided to start, because I had this book for about a year, I guess, and it's a small book. I think sometimes it's just good to see if I like the writing style, if I like the characters. So I picked this Hamish Macbeth mystery, Death of a Snob, and it is not the first one in the series, and I'm kind of okay with that. It's around the Christmas holidays, and Hamish Macbeth is not feeling well, but then he is kind of pulled together because a sort of friend of a friend is in need of help. She kind of thinks she might be in danger. She has something like a health retreat situation on a Scottish island where the islanders don't really like her very much or her business. So she would like to have Hamish stay with her to help see if there's anything wrong. So he stays and he meets people. He doesn't really tell anyone else that he is in the police, he's a detective. So he just listens to the conversations. And of course, within the space of time, one of the people, the snob, a person who is very much disliked in the story by most people, she dies. She's found dead, and so it's depicted as a close circle mystery, so that it's someone in this circle who is supposed to have done it. It is sort of that, but there are a few things that are thrown in later on that make it difficult for one to be able to figure it out on your own because of evidence that wasn't evident in the beginning. So I felt a little bit cheated that way, but not horrifically so. It was still a good book. Only problem I would say with this book is I didn't really warm up to anybody, including Hamish Macbeth. I don't have to warm up in terms of feeling like they're such wonderful people, but I didn't feel a particular je ne sais quoi. You know what I mean? Like okay, this character, I would like to continue my journey getting to know this character. I want to get into this series a little more. Not really. I would say I would give it another try. If I come across another book in this series, I would give it another try because I do feel like there is potential, and maybe this book just didn't live up to the potential. So we'll see. And then last but definitely not least, so if you had watched my TBR, you would have seen that I had a couple other books that I would like to get to again, and one of which I began but couldn't get much into, and then another one which I never got to at all, etc. And then another one I started and do want to continue, but I just haven't yet. That may come up another time, but in the early days, I should say, of March, I found out that one of my favorite mystery writers, Christopher Fowler, died. And I was pretty devastated. And I say devastated, not like I couldn't sleep or, cried or anything. I almost did a video about this, but I started to think a little bit about, like, what is it that we mourn when someone that, an author dies? Are we mourning the person? Are we mourning the work, the books that will never come out? And I think it's a weird feeling. It's a weird feeling that I wonder what it's like for people who are close to writers, artists, whoever, public figures, and they really are mourning that person, that loved one, and they have other people saying that they're so sad, but are they? Anyway, so that was where my mind was going. But instead of going too deep down that spiral, I decided to read one of the books. And the Bryant and May Peculiar Crimes mysteries are a series that I got into halfway through. So I started in the middle, went forward from there, and occasionally would go back. So in doing that, I would try to, sometimes I would get a hold of books through, usually like thrift books or something like that. And sometimes I would just get them out of the library. But this is one that I somehow missed. So when I saw it in the library and I tried to look it up and say, wait, did I actually read this book? Because sometimes you think, well, maybe I just don't remember the title. Maybe it was just so long ago that I read it, maybe a good decade ago that I forgot. But no, I'm very, very sure now that I did not read it before. It's just that when you see the title, you think maybe. So I put it on hold at the library. It came really quickly. And so I read The Invisible Code by Christopher Fowler. And this is, as usual, in the situation, Arthur Bryant and John May are two, at this point, quite elderly detectives who have been in this peculiar crime unit for an impossible amount of time. And this unit just investigates things that really don't make sense and that they just have a special thing for. I always call it the slightly Scooby-Doo series, because there's always this thought that there may be something supernatural involved. And then it just turns out that knowing about certain aspects of folklore or whatever helps the investigation, having esoteric knowledge, etc., but it doesn't actually end up being the solution. And I like that kind of twist. It's interesting to me anyway. And in this case, there are people who are dying in somewhat mysterious circumstances. One person seems to have, they died in a church, and there seem to be some children that think that they are responsible for her death because they thought she was a witch and they were trying to kill a witch. So there's some interesting historical aspects that come into it, which of course appeals to me because I love history and I love London, and these two things combine. But meanwhile, one of these head people in kind of government related that he's somewhat in charge. He has a big influence over the peculiar crime unit, whether it exists or not. And he's not a nice person. They kind of call him, I keep saying kind of, they call him a vampire because that's what he looks like. And he's not a warm sort of guy, but he calls Bryant and May over to investigate the fact that his wife seems to think that she's been cursed. She seems to think that some kind of supernatural forces are at work on her, and she is from another country in Europe, so she is with all of these ladies who lunch together who are spouses of this very important governmental type position, who treat her like an outsider, and she keeps getting in trouble with them, getting drunk and getting a little bit rowdy, and so one is not sure if she is dealing with mental illness, addiction, or if something sinister is really happening. So Bryant may get involved in investigating that along with the rest of the unit, and of course everything comes together in the long run. There's bits of humor in it. The cat that is in this book has kittens. There's a cat that belongs to the unit, which, slight spoiler alert, by the end of the series the cat dies, which I remember being really sad about when I first read that, because it was, I think, around the time that my own cat died. You try to comfort yourself by reading a book and the cat dies. But at this point the cat is still alive, named Crippen, and but is a girl. So anyway, that's a side point. There are a lot of interesting and strange characters that are met along the way. There's always these specialists that Bryant goes to, because he's a strange guy. He comes from a not very well-to-do part of London, and a family that he's very smart. He's an amazing detective, but he does have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder about people of the upper classes. So, but he does have a good amount of respect for people who are specialists in their field, in things like history, science, again, other types of arts, and he uses them for his investigation. He does find out a lot. I think it's really great, this series, because it's not just about the actual mystery, although the mystery is usually quite interesting. And there's always some kind of vehicle chase with some of the younger characters, usually like on a motorbike or something. But it it just brings in facts that sometimes I knew nothing about, and sometimes were things that I have read about before and love that is being incorporated into a mystery story. It's kind of like, in my own way, it's like when I read The Door of Time by Josephine Tey, when it was about investigating a modern day, well, 1950s modern day detective investigating Richard III. It was stuff coming together that you almost wouldn't expect, and yet it works really well. So if you haven't read this series, I do recommend it. It is, it could get dark at certain times, and yeah, it's almost bleak, uh, but fascinating and rather humorous. So that was my mystery genre reading for the month of March. I hope to get more done as the next couple months keep going, but I don't know when you will see the hat again, and probably not much in the summer, because if it's hot now, then it's going to be crazy in the summer. But I hope you've enjoyed these books, or at least I hope you enjoyed my discussion of these books. I don't know if you'd enjoy all of them yourself. Again, I don't know which the best one. I would say The Invisible Code was my favorite of this month. One Two Buckle My Shoe was really good, but because I just expect so much of Agatha Christie. What, she wrote so much. What do you expect? It wasn't bad. It really wasn't bad. It just wasn't great. So let me know what you think. If you've read any of these books, if you have similar or differing opinions, if you've read these authors, if you think I should go on with MCB. Part of me wants to start Agatha Raisin and see if I like that, but I'm not sure. But that is all for now. This is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book and, of course, mystery-filled day.